you want to understand why northern China mattered so much for so long, one of the best places to start is not with a dynasty, a battle, or a philosopher. It is with a river. The Yellow River, or Huanghe, helped create one of the great historical cores of East Asia. It watered farmland, fed early settlements, linked strategic plains, and forced rulers to think constantly about control, labor, and survival. But the Yellow River was never just a gift. The same river that supported early agriculture also carried the seeds of disaster. It flooded, changed course, buried fields, and sometimes destroyed entire landscapes of work. That is why the Yellow River is so important in Chinese history. It did not simply support civilization. It helped build it, test it, and at times nearly break it. The river's character begins with geology. Much of the Yellow River system runs through or drains the lowest plateau, a vast region of fine wind-blown sediment. Lowest is soft, dry, and easy to erode, which means rain and runoff can carry huge amounts of silt into the river. That is why the water often appears yellow or brown. This also means the river behaves differently from a clear mountain stream. It is carrying a landscape inside itself. That sediment can enrich soils downstream, but it also raises the riverbed as material settles out. Over long periods, the river can end up flowing above the surrounding plain, trapped between levees that people keep building higher. In simple terms, the Yellow River is powerful not only because of its water, but because of everything the water is carrying with it. That combination of water, fertile sediment, and open plain helped make the Yellow River Basin one of the major centers of early Chinese state formation. The North China Plain gave room for agriculture on a large scale, especially millet farming in the north before later crop systems spread more widely. The river basin also sat near corridors that connected different ecological zones, from uplands to plains to neighboring river valleys. Over time, this made it easier for political centers to gather grain, mobilize labor, and project power. Historians do not reduce early China to one river alone, and they should not. But it is difficult to imagine the rise of early northern kingdoms, walled centers, and long-lasting political traditions without the agricultural and geographic advantages created by the Yellow River world. The river did not determine everything, but it made some historical paths much more likely. Once states formed, the river became more than an environmental feature. It became part of political machinery. Whoever governed northern China had to manage food, transport, embankments, labor, and hydraulic risk across a huge space. Capitals of the broader Yellow River region benefited from access to grain and movement across the northern plain, but they also carried the burden of defending that landscape from war. Over centuries, this encouraged a style of rule in which administration, engineering, and mass labor mattered deeply. Dikes had to be repaired, channels had to be watched, local failures could become imperial crises. Even when later Chinese economic weight shifted southward, the Yellow River world remained politically and symbolically important. This is one reason the river appears so often in Chinese historical memory. It was not just scenery behind the state. It was one of the conditions that made large-scale northern rule possible at all. The Yellow River is famous not only for what it gave, but for what it destroyed. Because of its heavy sediment load and unstable lower course, it has repeatedly flooded and sometimes shifted dramatically across the plain. In late imperial and modern memory, the river earned the grim label China's sorrow. That phrase can sound poetic, but the underlying reality was brutally practical. When dikes failed, the water did not just get fields wet, it could drown villages, erase roads, ruin harvests, spread disease, and force enormous human migration. The river's silt made recovery harder because floodwater could leave behind altered channels and damaged soils. In other words, Yellow River disasters were not single events with neat endings. They were social shocks that could reshape regional life for years. A river that helped sustain dense settlement also made dense settlement dangerously vulnerable. It is not an accident that flood control appears so early in Chinese political imagination. Stories about the Great are built around taming waters and making ordered life possible. Whether we read those stories as myth, memory, or political symbolism, they tell us something important. In the Chinese tradition, managing water was tied to legitimate rule. A capable ruler did not only win wars or issue laws. A capable ruler also kept the landscape governable. That link between hydro and political authority survived well beyond the ancient world. River management required planning, taxation, local knowledge, technical skill, and above all, organization. It connected center and periphery through labor and obligation. The Yellow River therefore shaped political culture into ways at once. It created repeated emergencies, and it rewarded states that could turn emergency management into durable administration. If the Yellow River was so central, why did later Chinese economic gravity move toward the south? The answer is not that the river stopped mattering. It is that China grew into a larger and more diverse civilization system. Over time, the Yangtze Basin and southern regions became increasingly productive, commercially dynamic, and demographically important. Water transport networks, including the Grand Canal, linked these regional worlds and helped move grain and resources toward northern political centers. That changed the balance. The Yellow River was no longer the single dominant stage on which Chinese history unfolded. But even then, it remained strategically decisive. Northern states still depended on protecting the plain, securing transport, and limiting flood damage. So the story is not one river replacing another. It is the expansion of China beyond one core, while the old Northern River continued to shape power, risk, and memory. In the 20th century, the Yellow River remained terrifyingly capable of mass destruction. The 1931 floods in China, which affected several river systems, are remembered among the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history. And Yellow River flooding formed part of that wider catastrophe. In 1938, during the war with Japan, nationalist forces deliberately broke dikes on the Yellow River in an attempt to slow the Japanese advance. The flood achieved military delay at an immense civilian cost. Vast areas were inundated, and ordinary people paid for strategy with displacement, hunger, and death. These events matter because they show that the Yellow River was not only an ancient historical force, it remained a modern force, tied not just to nature but also to political choices. The river could still become a weapon, a disaster's own, and a national trauma within living historical time. Modern river management has tried to reduce exactly those kinds of catastrophic swings. The answer has not been one single miracle structure. It has been a long combination of embankments, reservoirs, sediment management, soil conservation, water allocation, and basewind planning. Parts of the lowest plateau have also seen large-scale ecological restoration and erosion control work. which matters because the river's danger begins upstream in the sediment system. None of this means the Yellow River has been fully solved. A river with this much silt, this much historical infrastructure, and this much demand placed on its water will always require active management. But the contrast with earlier centuries is still important. Modern states can monitor, model, and coordinate the basin in ways pre-modern rulers never could. The Yellow River remains difficult, yet it is now governed through a far denser web of science, engineering, and institutional control. So what did the Yellow River really do to Chinese history? The deepest answer is that it fused opportunity with constraint. It offered fertile land, strategic space, and one of the major settings in which early Chinese states could grow. But it also imposed costs that shaped institutions, myths, engineering traditions, and disaster memory. The river helped make northern China a center of power, while also reminding every ruler that power without environmental control is fragile. That is why the Yellow River deserves to be seen as more than a cradle of civilization or a symbol of flood. It was a system that forced Chinese history to become political, technical, and ecological at the same time. If you want to understand why the Chinese state often had to think in such large, organized, long-term ways, the Yellow River is one of the clearest places to look.